Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Sunday, June 21st, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Happy Father's Day if you're a dad, and a happy Father's Day out to my dad if he's gotten over his fear of technology enough to jump onto Twitch and start following me. I don't think that's possible. He's not even a gamer. He's not going to be here watching me go over 40-year-old rules from a game he doesn't play. Anyway, so much fun. I think what we're looking at today is the last day that we'll be spending time with the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Initiative and Combat Table, compiled by David M. Prata. That is DM Prata. It is his version 2.2 that came out March 19th, 2006. So at the time that these came out, they were, 32 years old then? Right? 74 would have been the beginning of D&D. I would guess, since some of these rules come from as late as the Wilderness Survival Guide in 86, then we're talking just 20 years, right? So with every source he was using, there was a full 20 years of gaming going on, and a fair amount of internet action happening for at least a decade, with people beating these rules up and putting them through the ringer and figuring out exactly the best way to utilize them. And you've got to assume that what happened in the mid-2000s, the mid-aughts, is that what we're calling them, with places like Ian World and Dragon's Foot and the other old school message boards, where there were people that were message board people hanging out. Old TSR people that had helped write the rules, that there would have been plenty of opportunity to ask poignant questions about specifics as any number of opportunities would have been available to everyone to do that, particularly the guy compiling it. So what we're looking at here is a compilation not only of the rules, but of, even though they're not sourced individually, saying, okay, well, Gary said this. Because remember, Gary was around for another couple of years himself after this was finished. And he was very active on message board systems and in places where he was accessible for answering questions. But only written sources are part of this compilation. Hey, there he is. Right on. How you doing today? So this is the chart. Just getting it up there, making sure it looks good. I wonder, should that be a little bigger? I'm going the wrong way. If I go this way a little bit, I guess there's room to make it a little larger. But, you know. Hey, speaking of cool stuff, David Pancake made this wonderful background. It's called Wizard Study. If you're not familiar with his work, go check it out. You just Google him, artist. I'll have his website link in the links at the bottom on YouTube and on Twitch if you want to go check out his work. Like a lot of artists this year, obviously he's hard pressed to one of the for income, because one of the main ways that artists such as himself, there, sure, you get commissions throughout the year and stuff, but you pick up a lot of commissions while you are at conventions and Ren fairs, and of course you sell a lot of stuff while you are there as well. So it's really like losing two sources of income. The folks that know you, that periodically purchase stuff from you, they'll be able to find you. And if you have an internet presence at all, a bit of a footprint, and a way of getting around and talking to people and interacting, then maybe you can pick up a bit of the slack because you've got more time. But even if you're motivated because you're in a lot of isolation, even if you're motivated to create a lot, you still got to sell some stuff. So get over to David Pancake's art website, check it out, maybe pick something up. I picked up this Wizard Study and decided and asked him in advance. I wanted to make sure it was all right to do this. Asked him in advance if it would be okay if I used it as a backdrop on my streaming, and told him I would make sure a link was added. And not only did he encourage it, he sent me a higher res image than I could have just grabbed from his website of the print that I purchased. And I did purchase it, and it's I received it rather quickly. I was impressed by how quickly I received it. I was super impressed by how well packed it was and ready to go. It's ready to be framed with the matting and everything set to go. So I need to figure out the best frame for it. I've got a number of other pictures in my living room that are framed in a particular way, and depending on where I put it, I got to figure out what would be the best style of frame. Something probably a little subtle gold leaf sort of narrow frame. We'll see. I don't know. I've got to figure it out, but it looks really good. There's a rather scary looking cat way up topside. I'll show you the rest of this image real quick. The bookshelf goes all the way up to there. There's a cat on the top shelf, and man, that cat looks very realistic. It's kind of scary. And actually, what you've got down here is a table, a book, a lantern, stack of books, and this skull thingy that's upside down with the metal clampy jaw thing. It's bizarre. It almost looks like a horrific Fabergé skull. I don't know. There's a little mouse there too. And that's why the cat's up there. Elephant. Anywho, I'm thinking about chopping the image up into a couple of pieces so that I can put myself behind the table as if it were a desk. But currently I kind of like just keeping it right around this spot here, because then you get to see what's on the table. I get to sit here off to the side, out of the way. I'm only blocking the lantern, which is nice, but get to see all the books and everything, and that all looks cool. Anyway, it's a pretty neat background, right? And I can still put up my whatever I'm talking about up in a sort of a slideshow thing off to the side, and it looks good, and it looks ready to go. So here we are, looking at a table. We've only got a few pages left. This is page 17 of 20, right? So there's a couple of tables left to check out. This one, there are two tables together here, and this is when you're comparing. Next two pages are both pairs are a pair of charts. Useful graphic tool comparing which of two actions occurs first in a round. Right? So if it's two melee and we're not looking at we're not looking at multiple melees. We're not looking at weapon speeds, stuff like that. Then straight up melee occurs at the same time. In this case, attacks with melee weapons speed factor is used to break ties in second and subsequent rounds. Alright, it's been a couple of weeks since we looked at that in particular. Remember, this is a tie D6 roll for initiative. Okay? So low speed factor after round 1. That's the important thing there. With the speed factors, if they're the same time. Higher attack, higher number of attacks rather, I should say. Higher number of attacks. In a melee multi-attack dealio, right? Melee multi is combatant with more attacks strikes first and last. Combatant with more attacks strikes first and last. Use a D6 or speed factor when both have odd or even number of attacks. So that is when these are the same. Both charging, longer reach is going to make the biggest difference in most cases. Higher attacks, then longer reach, higher number of attacks. So that's often the case. When we're in missile, same time. A lot of same times, but higher number of attacks makes a difference. Right? When we're in missile multi, then again, higher number of attacks makes a lot more difference then. Then when we're looking at spells, when it's two spellcasters both casting spells, straight up, shorter casting time, and then same time. Right? And then you always look at for instance, multiple missile attacks. You look at the caster's D6 versus the casting time. Missile attacks, same. When there's charge, you got to figure out how many segments. Remember, we just went over this last week. Was the you got to figure out what the full movement of somebody is. Divvy it up then into number of feet per segment they'll be moving. Figure out what the segment differential is compared to how close they are. So if there's a 2-segment casting time, let's say it costs 3 segments to cast a spell, and charge allows me to get there within 1 segment, then I'm going to be attacking on that next segment before the spell is cast. Multiple attacks in melee, as melee or melee with speed factor. melee, if you're doing melee with speed factor, you've got to look at that speed factor versus the casting time. And caster's d6 versus casting time when it's just against melee. This turn thing, subject to initiative determination, but cannot be interrupted unless the cleric is incapacitated. So turning is kind of special. Subject to initiative determination, but cannot be interrupted unless cleric is incapacitated. So you can smack a cleric around while he's in the throes of turning, but you're not going to disrupt it unless you literally knock him out. So you can continue to turn through being smacked around. High D6 versus low D6, red being low, high being on the left. You're almost always going to be deferring when it comes down to it, to the high D6. Look at all of these times when having the higher D6 plus dex in a lot of cases, right? But almost always looking at the high D6. But higher number of attacks makes a big difference when that does happen. So keep that in mind. If you keep those two things in mind, you are probably high D6, high D6, high D6. You're probably almost always going to be right if you err to that side. So that's worth noting. Last table. Last table they threw in here was a chart developed at Dragon's Foot. There you go. Illustrates the sequence of attacks between combatants with multiple attack routines. The timing of spells and similar actions is always key to the opponent's first attack, regardless of how many he is permitted. So if you only get one attack, there you go. When two or more opponents have attacks in the same row, initiative or weapon speed, where applicable, speed factor that should say, determines the order of attacks for that row. So I got 3. Somebody's only got 1. They're going to be going, well, I'm taking my second one. Pretty easy to line this up and figure it out. It's actually very handy as a visual aid. Skip right past the old Sutherland and take a look at the sources. Hey, Ink Dweller, how are you? Just checking out what's left here. I think the earliest thing we have being used as a source, see, it says Holmes 7478, so Holmes is actually 78. But there was a Dragon article from 1988. Oh, okay, that's actually later. So too, this 96. Yeah, see, this is long enough. I don't know that the memories, because I've seen some of the writings by this author, and quite frankly, they're not very clear. It's just, I wouldn't, unless it was written in a Dragon magazine at the time, or an adventure at the time, where multiple people in-house were getting to look it over, then it's hard to put too much weight on some of those sources. Obviously, Wilderness Survival Guide 86. Plenty of people in-house were checking it out. We go back to 80 with that, 79 with the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is a 4th edition Monster Manual, so 79, although the original one came out in 77, 78 for the Player's Handbook. So realistically, the oldest source on this list is information that came in the 77 Monster Manual. I'm going to guess, without knowing 100%, that one of the reasons they're using the 79 4th edition Monster Manual wasn't just because it was on hand. I'm going to guess that something was errated in that 4th edition that made it worth going to that source to snag that information. In any event, you're talking about roughly a dozen years, a decade plus worth of sources being used to put this all together. So obviously when we were playing OD&D and then moving on to first edition as the books came out in 77, 78, and 79, we were using what we had, but we weren't playing the game the way this would tell you to play. The way this would tell you to play. Because all the information obviously wasn't there. So there you go. And there's a lot of stuff beyond even the Dungeon Master's Guide. The point at which we started playing first edition in earnest would have been in 1979. No offense to Ernie for saying earnest. But Monster Manual, we incorporated it in 77, but we were really still playing original D&D with the 3 little booklets from 74. And this is my group. We weren't a basic group. Went from original to first. And then, of course, we added other stuff from the Player's Handbook in 78 when that came out. So, characters were going crazy at that point. Players in particular were very happy to see the new stuff because there were a lot of built-in rangers. Who didn't want to play a ranger when that first came out, right? Illusionists were a little more defined. Bards were still goofy. But a lot of new rules. And of course, equipment and stuff like that was better delineated. Spells, much more detailed once the Player's Handbook came out. But it wasn't until 79 with the Dungeon Master Guide release that once we had read through that and started incorporating the details of stuff from there, that we were really playing first edition. So, there you go. Little did we know it would be at least until 86 before we could be playing it correctly. Is that right? No, I don't think so. I think we were playing it correctly anyway. Lost Nomad, good morning. I don't remember your NO being capitalized in Lost Nomad. Has it always been like that? Or is it just, is that O actually a 0? Or is it an O capitalized? Maybe that's what's confusing me. Nice to have you guys in. I guess while I'm thinking of it, I should quickly open up the drawing page and put Lost Nomad. See, I always thought it was a lowercase l and a lowercase n. And I might be wrong. Couldn't get the name of the... Oh, geez, that's horrible. You must be heartbroken, huh? This is not me with like a super great memory who's realizing this, by the way. This is me who copies your name out of the chat chat and then transfers it into a notepad to keep track of who's been in over the course of the week, and seeing that it's different. So I am, in fact, not that smooth. But you knew that. So I've got both of you guys in. That's fantastic. I'll be making an announcement of who won last week's. Yeah, we're doing a virtual Gamehole Con admission. You guys looking forward to virtual Gamehole Con coming up in November? They called that one early. Every other convention was worried about getting hung out to dry on the bills, on the costs. So they were a little slower, most of them, to switch from physical conventions to virtual conventions. Which, you get it. If a place is going to have to go virtual, you want to make sure that you're not on the hook for a bunch of physical bills. And, we live in interesting times. So there you go. So we got the lovely David L. Pancake backdrop. As I said, that link will be in the notes. But let's have a look at some of the other things on the docket. We've got the Harryhausen Day coming up a week from tomorrow. 8 days away. Start making your plans. Decide what you're going to be watching. Tomorrow I'll be discussing the 6, 7, or 8 films that I have on DVD that I plan to watch Friday through that Monday at different times. So do yourself a favor and start making your own plans for next weekend. A week from tomorrow is the actual day. Old School Zine, baby. Issue 1 from Volume 1. It's in the works. It's looking pretty cool. John Batten is the, you can see his initials down here, is the artist whose image this was. I messed around with the framing a bit. I'm using a windless font for the OS Zine title. And, well, it looks pretty good. A lot of cool stuff going to be in it. There's going to be an adventure in the center. I think we're looking at 16 pages. There'll be a map, centerfold map, and then 4 to 6 pages either side of it with all the details for the adventure. There'll be a couple of NPCs, a couple of magic items, a couple of equipments. Interesting, maybe those will be. How do you get it? This will be available when it comes finished on, it'll be available on DriveThruRPG. I use them. I don't use anywhere else. It's not because I don't like anywhere else, but it's just extra hoop jumping, and I guess I just got tired of, I tried using 3 or 4 different sites at one point and doing some direct stuff, and just the amount of time you put into it versus the number of additional sales you get, just not worth it. And I've been with DriveThruRPG since 2001. Well, was with RPG Now, which was then rival to DriveThruRPG when that came out, and then they both came under the banner OBS, and eventually RPG Now was mothballed, and now it's all DriveThruRPG. In any event, it's the same entity, essentially, that I started with back in 2001, so that's where it'll be, and you won't be able to shut me up when it's available, trust me. Looking at the rest of the week, we're going to do the weekly news and giveaway tomorrow, cartography and world building on Tuesday, campaign discussion on Wednesday, mostly about Grimbald, crafting and painting on Thursday, building virtual tabletop adventures on Friday, another cartoon review on Saturday, rules retrospective. I got a new thing I'm looking at. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm not ready to commit to what next week is on Sunday's going to be, but it'll be cool. Thank you very much for being there, being followers, being in the chat. I appreciate it. Very kind of you. If you're catching up with this on YouTube, please do subscribe and give us a thumbs up, and I appreciate that too. I want everybody to have a great day and a great week if I don't catch you later on. Happy Father's Day to those who are fathers, and we will catch you soon. Bye-bye.